Whisper soft storytelling begins. Breathe in slowly now, and let the day's weight gently slip from your shoulders, as if carried off by a soft wind over a quiet moor. You are safe here. Still, this story will hold you. Let your thoughts float like mist.
As we begin,
Our story begins high above the Brantsla moors, where the wind rolls in wide, sleepy waves over hills wrapped in heather and low stone walls. At the edge of the northern reach where the land folds into cliffs and the sea lies hidden beneath cloud and gull-cry there, sits a watchtower that is old, older than the road that winds up to it, older than the village below. It leans slightly, as if listening to the hills. Its stones are patched with lichen and time, and its roof, once sharp with slate, is softened now, bowed and moss-draped. Few know it is there, fewer still know who keeps it. But if you walked close on a quiet night past the rowan tree with twisted limbs, past the half-fallen arch where owls nest, you might hear something. Not words, not song, a flutter, perhaps, a hush of feathers, the low breath of a falcon in sleep. Inside that tower lives a man named Ewan. He has no title, no post. But for the past 15 winters, he has watched the skies. Ewan is tall and soft-footed, with hair graying at the temples and hands weathered by string and ink. He keeps a journal bound in cracked leather. And each morning, before the mist rises, he climbs the narrow stone steps to the top of the tower. He does not ring bells. He does not sound horns. He simply watches, and he writes. Every movement of the clouds, every bird that breaks the horizon, every whisper of wing or flicker of shadow against the hills. Ewan's companion is only one, is a falcon called Naya. She does not cry or shriek as some birds of prey do. She is quiet, watchful. Like him, they were not always alone. Years ago, this was one of 7 watchtowers kept by the Order of the Winged Vigil. Each tower had a keeper, falcon, and a book. The keepers would send messages to each other by bird or beacon. They watched the moors, the roads, the river routes, not for war, but for wonder. Lost travelers. Flocks gone off course, signs in the stars. The order was disbanded long ago, seen as unnecessary, perhaps too gentle a use of coin, but Ewan stayed. No one asked him to, he simply remained. And now the people in Brantsla speak of him with a kind of reverence. They call him the Watcher, or the quiet one who hears what the land forgets. Some think he is mad. Others think he is dreaming for all of them. Tonight the fire is low in the tower hearth. Ewan stirs a pot of nettle soup, while Nia perches near the narrow window slit, her golden eyes reflecting the stars. The sky is unusually clear. No clouds, no wind. Just that velvet black, pricked with thousands of ancient lights. Ewan looks up, stilled by a sensation he cannot name. He opens his journal. Pages are thick with notes, tiny sketches, feather-pressed leaves, and delicate star charts. But before he can write, Nia tilts her head sharply. She has heard something he has not. Then, soft as a whisper, there is a sound, a bell. Not from the village, not from the church, but high and distant and impossible. A bell that hums, not rings. A bell without metal, without clapper. Ewan stands slowly. The hairs on his arm rise like wheat in a sudden breeze. He sets down his spoon, closes the journal, walks to the stair. Nia follows. They climb together up the spiral stone to the very top. The air is colder here, crisper. The stars feel closer. The wind speaks in hushes. And then he sees it. A shimmer over the far ridge. A pulse of light, low and slow, like breath. He does not understand it. But he writes one word in the margin of his journal. The bell did not sound again that night. But it stayed with Ewan. Not in his ears, but in his chest. A slow, round hum, like something forgotten, remembering itself. He hardly slept, though not from fear. It was a curious wakefulness, like the kind that keeps a child listening under blankets, waiting for footfalls that never come. A half-dream, a tug on the thread of something bigger than speech. Nia roosted near the stone window slit, feathers puffed gently against the chill. Her head tucked beneath one wing, but not truly resting. She, too, had heard it. By dawn, a fine frost webbed the moor. The hills stretched out white and blue, like folded parchment dusted in ash. Owen made Tiro's hip, and Tamand watched the sky pinken. He turned to a fresh page in his journal, dipped his quill. Day 5 of the month of frost open, heard the silent bell at the 10th hour of the moon. Single tone, low, sustained. No origin identified. Falcon aware, sky clear. He paused, then added one more line. I believe it was calling something home. That afternoon, Ewan descended the tower. He rarely left, but today he packed a bundlesome dry bread, hard cheese, and a linen wrap of dried cherries and made his way down the path to Brandsla village. The path was flanked by sleeping brambles and crumbling stone walls. Crows watched him pass. A field mouse darted beneath frostbitten grass. As he reached the bottom of the ridge, the bell came again. Not loud, not close, but there. A tone held so long, it felt more like presence than sound. Ewan turned his head slowly, eyes narrowing on the northern wood. The bell seemed to come from within the forest, from the roots, from the silence. But he pressed on to the village, one hand resting on the leather cover of his journal, the other brushing Nia's wing. She flew overhead now, circling. Brandslow was a sleepy place, all thatched roofs and low-timbered beams. Smoke curled from chimney pots, and the scent of baking barley bread drifted through the air like memory. Went and stopped at the apothecary's window, where an old woman named Maylis was drying lavender and storing wintergreen in glass jars. She looked up and smiled, a rare thing. Watch her, she said softly. Maylis, Ewan replied, bowing his head. She peered at him. You've heard something? He nodded. The bell, she guessed. He looked up sharply. You're not the only one, she said, turning to the back of the shop. 4 others came to me this week. All said the same thing. Bell without sound. Ewan's breath slowed. It hums like stone, she continued. And always from the north. She took a small pouch from the shelf and handed it to him. Hawthorn and valerian. For clarity of dreams. Ewan slipped the pouch into his cloak and bowed again, murmuring his thanks. He stayed only long enough to refill his ink and leave a few notes for the village steward. Then he climbed back toward the tower. The moors were dimming now. Shadows stretched long across the heather. But something had changed. Where before, the winds sang lonely through the grass, now it was still. Not silent, just listening. Ewan stopped, closed his eyes, there again, like the hum. Not one bell this time, too far apart, but echoing. And in between them a third sound. A faint, breath-like call, barely caught by human ear. Ewan whispered under his breath, a chorus. He returned to the tower by moonrise. The fire crackled low. He lit beeswax candles and turned to a fresh page in his journal. Multiple tones, harmonic layering. 3 distinct directions, not random, possibly a pattern, possibly a map. Then he sketched rings, lines between them, crescents of falcon's eye in the center. Nia rested her head on his shoulder. He did not look at her, but he knew she was dreaming too. That night, Ewan's sleep came slow, but deep. In the dream, he stood in the middle of the moor, under a sky of turning stars. The bells rang not with clappers, but with memory. The earth beneath him pulsed like a heartbeat. The falcon was above, but larger, her wings like midnight sails. And then, a voice. Neither man nor woman, neither young nor old. We are the ones who listen. And we have heard you. Ewan awoke just before dawn, breath steady, eyes wide. He reached for his journal. The watchers are not alone. The next morning, the moor wore a frost as delicate as lace. It crackled softly beneath Ewan's boots as he stepped out from the watchtower, the door creaking behind him like an old thought trying to speak. Above, the sky was palest gray, and Nia wheeled gently in widening spirals, her flight slow and measured. He carried no map today. The bells, those voiceless tones, were guiding him now. Each had a direction, a note in a harmony that drew him not north or east, but downward, toward the earth itself, toward what was hidden below. Near the base of the tower ridge lay a copse of old ash trees. Their trunks split with age, their branches twisted in a dance only the wind could read. Few went there anymore. The path to it was long overgrown, and the stones once marking its entrance were buried beneath moss and time. But Ewan remembered. As a boy, he had wandered there and found an odd circle of stones, 12 in all, none taller than his knee. Inside the circle, grass grew even in winter, soft and strangely warm. His father, a once falconer himself, had called it a listening place. Now, 30 years later, the stones were still there. The circle, still silent, but something new. The frost had not touched the grass inside the stones. Even in the deepest part of winter, it was green, soft as lamb's ear underfoot, speckled with tiny blue flowers that bloomed only in moonlight. The village called them star's breath, and they were rare. Ewan knelt at the center. Nia landed on a branch above him, eyes glinting. He pressed his hand to the ground. At first he felt nothing but soil, cold, firm, then a pulse, soft, faint, but there, as though the ground itself had a heartbeat. He leaned closer, placing his ear to the earth, and he heard it. Not a bell this time. Whispered through roots and stone. Older than any tongue he knew. Not words, exactly. Just knowing. He returned to the tower before dusk, quiet and thoughtful. He made no entry in his journal that evening, only drew, circles within circles. Falcon wings stretched wide, bell curves overlaying roots. The bells were not merely signals, they were anchors. Echoes from a time before the towers, before even the abbeys, maybe before men. That night, the dream came stronger. This time, he stood not on moorland, but beneath it. In a hall carved of stone and lit by lanterns that hung in air without chains, the falconeia was vast beside him, and her eyes burned like twin moons. The voice came again. You are the last watcher. But you are not the only who remembers. The hum is a gate, and you are the key. Ewan woke gasping, heart slow but strong, as though it too had finally heard its purpose.
Outside.
The wind had picked up, a soft whirling breath that spoke in rustles and tremors. He stepped to the window and looked out over the moors. 3 lights, low on the horizon, not fire, not stars, not man-made. They pulsed in rhythm. He whispered aloud, though no one could hear him. It's time. Morning rose pale and slow. Ewan prepared with quiet precision. He brewed elderflower tea, added a drop of honey, and drank it with reverence, as if it were part of an ancient rite. Then, from a weathered chest beneath his desk, he drew out an object he hadn't touched in years, a small hammer of bell bronze. Its head was etched with runes worn thin by time symbols passed down from watcher to watcher, always kept in silence, never explained. He held it in his palm and let its weight center him. The time had come to listen fully. He dressed in his deep blue woolen cloak, the one lined with hawk feathers at the collar. Nia circled above once more, wings catching the first gold of daybreak. They were going, not just anywhere, but to Dunmere Abbey. The abbey stood 3 valleys away, nestled at the edge of a pine forest where mist lingered long into afternoon. It had long been abandoned, its monks gone for decades now, lost to plague or pilgrimage. No one visited it anymore, but the bell still stood. Atop its crooked tower, the bell hung heavy, silent, and old. No rope, no clapper, just stillness. And yet it hummed. Ewan arrived by midday. The path was slow, but the land welcomed him, as though it had been waiting. Inside the abbey, the air was different, cooler, denser. He stepped lightly over stone tiles cracked with moss, brushing his hand along the walls where scripture had once been painted in ochre and soot. Time had peeled most of it away, but a few Latin words remained, faded and ghost-like. He whispered them. In silence Hio Deus Loquitur, in silence God speaks. The bell tower groaned as he climbed, each step a creak, a memory, a breath. The light grew dimmer, the higher he rose, until he reached the open chamber at the top. There it was. The bell. Massive, bronze-green with age, smooth but weather-streaked, and yet oddly luminous, not bright but alive. Ewan stepped close, then closer still, and finally he lifted the hammer. He did not strike the bell. He did not need to. Instead, he held the hammer an inch away and whispered a note, not a word, but a tone. The same one he had heard days ago, sung back to the bell in gentle mimicry. The air changed. The bell responded, not in sound, but in feel. The floor hummed beneath him. Stone whispered, Wind rose inside, the tower encircled, and then the bell sang. Not aloud, but within him. A resonance so deep, so rich, that his bones remembered things he had never known. His breath stilled, his vision blurred, but not from fear, from awakening. He saw the moors, the abbeys, the falcons. He saw the first watcher carving signs into rock with a blade of glass, saw the bells being cast not in fire, but in light, their shapes chosen not by man but by something older than wind. He saw falcons roosting in towers built to mirror the stars. And then he saw himself walking toward a door beneath the earth, a door only a watcher could open. He awoke seated in the bell tower's corner. The light was dimming again. Twilight had returned. Nia was perched beside him. He reached for his journal with trembling hands and wrote only one word: open, then another, north. And below that, tonight. He returned to the stone circle after nightfall. The blue starflowers shimmered like frost-lit lanterns. The air was thick with hush. He stepped to the center and removed his glove, pressing his bare hand to the soil, and he sang the note again. Same one from the bell. Soft, full of breath and stillness. This time the ground answered, not just with a hum, but with movement. The earth beneath his palm grew warm, then loose. Then it opened. A ring of grass folded inward, revealing a staircase carved into ancient stone, unlit, unknown, waiting. He did not hesitate. The sun sank low over the moors, casting long, sleepy shadows across the moss-covered stones of Dunmere Abbey. Evening bells had long ceased their peals, replaced by the hush of monastic silence. Among the cloisters, Brother Ewan walked slowly, fingers brushing the cool, ivy-draped stone, lantern swaying gently in his hand. In this sacred place, time seemed to exhale. Though still young, Ewan had learned the ancient rhythm of Abbey Litha chanting hours, the illumination of manuscripts, the tending of bees, the grinding of herbs. But what pulled at him tonight was neither prayer nor duty, but a whisper, hum that pulsed faintly beneath the abbey floor, beneath thought, beneath memory. Dunmere was known for its bell, a great bronze relic that hung in the spire. But this bell had no clapper. It had not rung for centuries. And yet, some said, on nights when the moon was thin, it hummed. Not all could hear it, but Ewan could, especially in the hours just before sleep. Ewan had first heard the hum as a child, when he'd been brought to the abbey after a fire claimed his village. A falcon had landed beside him on the scorched fields, silent and still, watching. In its talons it clutched a single feather not its own. That feather, impossibly pale, now rested beneath his pillow. He believed it to be tied to the bell somehow. It's both silent, both waiting. Tonight the humming was stronger. It called him not from the spire above, but from the crypts below. He lit his lantern and wrapped his cloak around him. The wind outside had turned sharp. The monks were already abed, each in his cell behind wooden doors. Only the flickering light of the sanctuary lamp guided Ewan as he descended into the cold, ancient stairwell. The crypt smelled of dust and beeswax. Rows of stone coffins lined the narrow chamber, and the air trembled faintly with unseen sound. Ewan paused beside the oldest Tumabat Norwin, whose carved face wore an expression of serene concentration. He had read of Norwin, a visionary, a listener of stars. Some said he'd invented a musical code that monks used to embed prayers in silence. Ewan knelt and pressed his ear to the flagstone. There, the hum. He followed it hands, grazing the walls until he reached a section cold to the touch, smoother than the rest. His fingers found a notch, a mechanism clicked, a hidden door swung open. A narrow stair, carved with symbols and lined with silver dust, spiraled downward into warmth. The hum deepened, wrapping around Ewan like a lullaby. He descended slowly, lantern held high, eyes wide. Symbols marked each step-wings, stars, bells, moons. Midway down, he paused. A small alcove held a figure, a sculpture of a falcon perched on a bell. Its wings were folded, and its eyes seemed to shimmer with real tears. Carved beneath it, only the silent can awaken the song. He continued. The staircase ended at a door made of stone and oak. Ewan pushed it open into a bell-shaped chamber. Its walls were smooth bronze, resonant yet utterly silent. At the chamber's heart sat a pedestal with a humming orb. Behind it, a great circular wall shifted slowly with moving symbols and astrolabe of memory and time. Ewan touched the orb. Warmth traveled up his arm. Symbols aligned. The wall parted. The watchers returned not to guard the land, but to remember what the land could not. Bells were the seeds. Falcons the messengers. The dream is the door. You are both witness and key. He stepped through. The chamber beyond was filled with light, not harsh, but golden and drifting like honey. Scrolls lined the walls, and in the center stood a desk, ink still wet. Pen quivering mid-word as if the writer had just vanished. On the desk lay a journal. Ewan opened it. Written in ancient ink. Those who hear the bell must transcribe the dream. He saw entries that described visions soaring above moors, diving into deep wells, listening to the stars chant in their crystalline tongues. The dreams were real, and they needed to be remembered. That was the bell's purpose. Back in his cell, Ewan placed the journal beside the falcon's feather. Sleep took him gently. In his dream he walked among monks with no mouths, who communicated in harmonious hums. The bell tower shimmered, and the clapperless bell began to turn slowly, vibrating with light. From its mouth, falcons flew not of flesh, but of starlight. One flew to Ewan's shoulder. It whispered not in words, but in memory. He woke with tears on his cheeks. The abbey was still, yet the bell hummed. Over the following weeks, Ewan returned nightly to the hidden vault. The orb showed him different symbols each time, songs he did not understand but learned to hum. Each time he did, the silence in the abbey deepened and grew richer. Other monks began to notice. They whispered of dreams, of bells they couldn't hear while awake, of falcons in the rafters. Ewan began recording their dreams, adding them to the scrolls. The abbey was becoming not just a place of prayer, but of preservation of human longing wrapped in sacred quiet. One morning, just before dawn, a real falcon perched atop the bell tower. Its eyes glowed faintly. In its beak it held another feather white as moon milk. It dropped it at Ewan's feet and vanished. The feather pulsed with warmth. He brought it to the orb. This time the symbols aligned into a full circle. The bell above them, silent for 500 years, hummed once, then sang. A soft, low note, like a breath held and released. The entire abbey heard it, and dreamed together that night. Years passed. Ewan became the new abbot of Dunmere. The monks called him the Listener. Pilgrims came not for relics, but for rest, for dreams. The vault remained open to those who could hear the hum. The bell sang only once a season, and only when someone new joined the dream. At night, under stars, the abbey glowed faintly, each window lit by a candle, each room a sanctuary of silence, and the bell waited for the next listener. The village of Eld Hollow slept beneath a quilt of snow, rooftops glistening like sugar loaves under the pale silver moon. Smoke rose in lazy curls from chimneys, and all was still, save for the soft tap-tap of a hammer behind the glovemaker's shutters. Aurelia was the glovemaker of Eld Hollow. Her fingers worked slowly, lovingly, threading gold and wool with patience only solitude could teach. She stitched not just fabric, but stories and ancient tales whispered to her in dreams. Tales that curled into the seams of every glove she made. Her cottage, warmed by a crackling hearth, smelled of beeswax and lavender. Shelves lined the walls, filled with silken threads, carved buttons, and old books bound in faded leather. But on one high shelf, wrapped in blue velvet, sat an object unlike any other. A single, impossibly delicate glove made of silver-threaded vellum. She had never made it. She had only found it, years ago, folded inside a hollow tree beyond the village's edge. With it came dreams soft, vivid dreams of courtly halls, falconers' calls, and a masked figure who whispered riddles in a language she did not know. In every winter solstice since the glove sang, not in music, but in sensation. When Aurelia held it, her breath slowed. Her heartbeat followed the rhythm of distant drums. Her thoughts turned inward, peaceful and slow, as if 1,000 stories slept in the lining, waiting to be read. This year the dream changed. On the longest night she dreamt not of palaces or falconers, but of a girl young, cloaked in frost with one bare hand. The glove hovered above her, but she did not reach. When Aurelia woke, the silver glove was warm, humming. She wrapped it in velvet and placed it in her satchel. For the first time in decades, she left Eld Hollow before dawn. Snow crunching beneath her boots, breath puffing before her like a ghost. No one saw her go. She followed the old path, past the standing stones, past the frozen brook where children once skated. The trees whispered, branches heavy with snow. Somewhere ahead, the hollow tree waited. She found it just before sunrise. The tree, gnarled and split, looked like a sleeping giant's hand. Inside, the hollow pulsed faintly as if holding a breath. Aurelia knelt and placed the glove within. The air changed. A low hum, like the stirring of ancient bells, filled the grove. The snow shimmered. The hollow deepened, became a tunnel of bark and light. She stepped inside. The tunnel twisted like a corkscrew, soft underfoot, the light shifting from silver to gold to deep plum. Aurelia's breath slowed. Her satchel grew lighter. She descended, slowly, into a space between dreaming and memory. She emerged in a chamber shaped like a cupped hand. Walls of soft velvet moss and old carved stone held faint traces of frescoes glove-makers, scribes and weavers, all with closed eyes and gentle smiles. At the center sat a loom, and beside it, the girl from her dream. She looked up. "Your gloves carry the dreams we forget," the girl said, "but this one is meant to remember." Aurelia stepped closer. The silver glove floated now, unrolling like a scroll. Inside were threads she had never stitched, scenes of her own life, her own memories, playing gently across the surface. The girl touched Aurelia's bare hand. "Your work has been sacred, but there is more to make. Love's not too warm, but to awaken." She guided Aurelia's hand to the loom. The threads were mist and starlight, laughter and sorrow. Together, they wove through the night. Above, the village slept. But some stirred, dreaming of warmth, of hands held, of soft gloves that whispered secrets when worn. When Aurelia returned to Eld Hollow, the glove was gone. But her satchel was full of new patterns, of new stories. She worked quietly through the winter, never speaking of where she had gone. But every glove she made that year found its perfect match. Strangers knocked on her door as if guided by fate, seeking a warmth they couldn't name. Each glove carried a hum, and once a year when the snow lay thick, a girl in frost would appear at the edge of the village, not seeking, but watching, waiting for the next dreamer. The snow had melted in Eld Hollow, where once rooftops shimmered with frost and the trees stood like silent watchmen. Now the village exhaled into spring. Crocuses peeked through the thatch of old snow, and the creek by the glovemaker's cottage burbled awake with fresh meltwater. Aurelia, too, stirred with the season. Her hands worked steadily, but something had changed since the night she placed the silver glove back into the hollow tree. The rhythm of her stitching slowed, deepened. She no longer dreamed of falconers and castles. Instead, she dreamed of looms in distant places, of children with songs hidden in their palms, of people far and wide with silent stories wanting to be worn. And in those dreams, the gloves she made didn't just whisper, they sang. One morning, as mist drifted low along the forest floor, a traveler arrived, a boy no more than 12, with bare feet and a cloak the color of twilight. He carried nothing, no satchel, no supplies, only a folded piece of vellum stitched in a thread so fine it shimmered like dew. He did not knock. He waited outside her door, standing as still as a sapling. Aurelia opened the door and simply said, "Come in, then." The boy entered and placed the vellum on her workbench. Inside, it was not a letter, but a pattern complex and ancient, written in a script she did not know, and yet somehow understood. "This glove," he said quietly, "is for a queen who has forgotten her name." She nodded. Her fingers already moved to gather thread, needles, parchment. She didn't ask where he'd come from or who sent him. The boy sat near the fire, warming his feet. "There are more patterns," he said, "more stories waiting. It's hidden in root and river, in ruin and rhyme." Aurelia stitched. This glove was unlike any she'd ever made. It required silence. For days, she said not a word, letting the forest and fire speak for her. The threads whispered as they passed through cloth. When she finished, the glove shimmered with memory. A name floated faintly above it, just one letter, shifting gently like candle smoke. The boy took it and bowed. "I will return," he said, "when the stars shift again." He vanished into morning fog. Years passed. Villagers spoke of the glovemaker as they once did, of bards and wise women. Not just a craftswoman, they said, but a keeper, weaver of things forgotten. Her gloves were worn by shepherds and scholars, kings and children. None remembered exactly how they received them. Only that their dreams changed after. The hollow tree remained, its bark warm even in snow. Sometimes Aurelia left patterns within its gloves to be delivered by unseen hands. She dreamed now of cities she had never seen, of deserts with bells buried beneath the dunes, of towers made not of stone but of song. And in each dream, a figure in frost watched from a distance, never drawing close. One midsummer evening, as fireflies danced like scattered sparks in the field behind her cottage, a woman arrived. Cloaked in starlight, silent as dusk, she placed 2 gloves on the bench one Aurelia had made decades ago. One she had not. "They meet at last," the woman whispered, and for a moment Aurelia saw it. 2 hands clasping, 2 lives joined. A story completed in silk and silence. The woman left as quietly as she had come. That night, Aurelia lit no candle. She lay beneath her window, watching stars prick the sky like stitches across a velvet field. The gloves hummed softly on the bench. She slept, and in sleep, she dreamed of another glovemaker, far away. A child with thread tucked behind their ear. A whisper from the forest. The story beginning again. Aurelia no longer counted the seasons by the falling leaves or the snow's return, but by the visits. There came a man with a velvet pouch full of petals each, one dyed with stories from a forgotten dialect of a vanished land. Another year a sailor arrived with fingers too burned for weaving, but who carried a spindle carved from whalebone. Each one left something, a story, a fragment, a pattern. Aurelia crafted, she stitched names that had never been spoken aloud, and symbols from languages buried in bell towers and sea caves. Her gloves no longer rested in shop windows. They were sent some by wind, some by stream, some by shadow. A tapestry grew, not of cloth, but of whispers, of dreams remembered and fears soothed, of courage shaped in velvet seams. And Aurelia, she smiled more often, not wide, not with fanfare, but like someone who'd heard a secret and chose to keep it safe. There are still those who say that in a certain forest, if you walk just past the silver birch grove and let the scent of elderflowers guide you, you'll find a small cottage by a stream. Inside, a woman with quiet eyes might hand you a pair of gloves. You may not know what they mean, not at first, but that night, as you rest your hands upon the pillow, you'll dream. And in the dream something long lost will reach out and hold you. Aurelia, the falconer's daughter, woke each morning with a longing she didn't yet understand. Since the falcon's silent return, one moonless night its feathers, silvered with frost and eyes dark with memory, her dreams had shifted. No longer did she dream of court banquets and velvet gloves. Now she dreamed of wings beating against distant winds, of mountain passes cloaked in mist, and of a falcon's cry echoing through ancient canyons. Each day she trained the falcon anew. He did not speak, none of them, did but something pass between them. Thread? A knowing. Then, on a morning veiled in mist, a girl appeared at the edge of the trees. She wore a cloak of dusk feathers and carried a scroll sealed with wax, shaped like a talon. A what? "You are the one who waits," the girl said. Aurelia nodded, though she hadn't known it until that moment. The scroll was not written in ink, but in the fine etchings of claw and wing. Somehow, Aurelia read it. Path, a purpose, a plea. Queen had vanished, turned to stone in the Valley of Echoes.
Amen.
One who walked with the Silent Falcon could awaken her. Aurelia packed lightly. One glove, stitched with star thread. One vial of melted snow. And the Silent Falcon who flew above her, shadowing her journey. They crossed plains where the wind told stories, forests where the trees bent low to whisper warnings, and rivers that ran backward in time. At each turn the falcon waited, watched, and once when Aurelia faltered, spread its wings wide to shield her from the storm. At last they came to the Valley of Echoes. There stood the queen, carved from moonstone, her face half remembered. Aurelia placed the glove upon the queen's hand. The wind ceased, the falcon cried, and stone turned to breath. Aurelia did not return to Eldhallow. Years passed. Tales spread of a falconer who walked the skies, guiding queens and kings, not with words, but with wings. Children wore feathers behind their ears and dreamed of mountains. Scholars argued whether she was real or a legend born from dusk. But in a distant glade, past birch and bramble, a stream still sings. Sometimes on the soft hush of twilight, you might see a shadow overhead, a falcon. And if you follow its path not with haste, but with heart, you might find a cottage where gloves hang like prayers from branches. And inside, a woman with starlight in her hair might offer you one. Not a gift, a calling. That night you'll dream, and in the dream, wings will rise and carry you. But if your heart holds doubt or if you return the glove, the dream will shift. The falcon will circle once and vanish. And you will wake with the sound of wind and wings just beyond your window. A whisper of the path not taken. And so the tale continues, not in books or scrolls, but in the quiet choices of those who listen. A shepherd boy who sleeps beneath stars and wakes with feathers at his door. A sailor who follows a falcon across the sea, never to return the same. A child, like you, perhaps, who reads this tale and wonders, if I found the glove, what would I choose? The answer lies not in the telling, but in the flight. The snow had melted in Eldhallow, where once rooftops shimmered with frost and the trees stood like solemn sentinels. Now the village exhaled into spring. Crocuses pierced the thawing soil, and the creek beside the falconer's cottage gurgled with new life. Aurelia, the falconer's daughter, woke each morning with a longing she didn't yet understand. Since the falcon's silent return one moonless night, tits feathers silvered with frost and eyes dark with memory, her dreams had shifted. No longer did she dream of court banquets and velvet gloves. Now she dreamed of wings beating against distant winds, of mountain passes cloaked in mist, and of a falcon's cry echoing through ancient canyons. Each day, she trained the falcon anew. He did not speak, none of them did, but something passed between them. A thread. Knowing. Then, on a morning veiled in mist, a girl appeared at the edge of the trees. She wore a cloak of dusk feathers and carried a scroll sealed with wax shaped like a talon. "You are the one who waits," the girl said. Aurelia nodded, though she hadn't known it until that moment. The scroll was not written in ink, but in the fine etchings of claw and wing. Somehow, Aurelia read it. A path, a purpose, a plea. A queen had vanished, turned to stone in the Valley of Echoes. Only one who walked with the silent falcon could awaken her. Aurelia packed lightly, one glove stitched with star thread, one vial of melted snow, and the silent falcon who flew above her, shadowing her journey. They crossed plains where the wind told stories, forests where the trees bent low to whisper warnings, and rivers that ran backward in time. At each turn, the falcon waited, watched, and once when Aurelia faltered, spread its wings wide to shield her from the storm. At last they came to the Valley of Echoes. There stood the queen, carved from moonstone, her face half remembered. Aurelia placed the glove upon the queen's hand. The wind ceased, the falcon cried, and stone turned to breath. Aurelia did not return to Eldhallow. Years passed, tales spread of a falconer who walked the skies, guiding queens and kings, not with words, but with wings. Children wore feathers behind their ears and dreamed of mountains. Scholars argued whether she was real or a legend born from dusk. But in a distant glade past birch and bramble, a stream still sings. Sometimes on the soft hush of twilight, you might see a shadow overhead. And if you follow its path not with haste, but with heart, you might find a cottage where gloves hang like prayers from branches. And inside, a woman with starlight in her hair might offer you one. Not a gift, a calling. That night, you'll dream. And in the dream, wings will rise and carry you. But if your heart holds doubt or if you return the glove, the dream will shift. The falcon will circle once and vanish. And you will wake with the sound of wind and wings just beyond your window. a whisper of the path not taken. And so the tale continues, not in books or scrolls, but in the quiet choices of those who listen. A shepherd boy, who sleeps beneath stars and wakes with feathers at his door. A sailor who follows a falcon across the sea, never to return the same. A child like you, perhaps, who reads this tale and wonders, if I found the glove, what would I choose? The answer lies not in the telling, but in the flight. The flight beyond it was late autumn when the falcon returned again. This time it did not come alone. A girl from the western cliffs had followed its shadow across moors and marsh, her boots worn thin, her heart open. Her name was Mira, and she did not come seeking stories. She came because the wind had spoken her name. Aurelia met her by the stream. Neither asked questions. The glove was passed. Mira's journey led her north to the teeth of the world, mountains so high that stars whispered to their peaks. Their ancient towers of glass and bone hid the last eco-scribes, keepers of time-forgotten truths. They, too, had turned to stone. But Mira carried more than courage. She carried a melody taught to her by the wind, remembered in a lullaby sung before memory. With each step, she sang. With each note, frost melted from the towers, and the air thickened with stories long sealed away. The falcon flew above, silent still, and when Mira reached the highest spire and sang the final note, the stars bent low. The towers awoke. The eco-scribes breathed, and the world, once more, remembered what it had forgotten. Now, 2 falcons fly, and somewhere a new glove waits. Perhaps for you. Whispers in winter, long after Mira's song stirred the towers, the season turned again. Winter crept across the land, not cruel, but quiet. Trees stood bare, rivers slowed beneath ice, and the sky wore a pale crown of clouds. In a small fishing village on the frost-bitten coast, a boy named Corwin dreamed of wings. He had never seen a falcon, but he carved their likeness into driftwood and tucked feathers into his scarf. He felt them near in the hush between waves. Oh. One night, as snow fell like ash from stars, a shadow passed over his roof. A single black feather landed on his windowsill. The next morning, a path of talon marks led to the edge of the frozen bay. Corwin followed. He crossed the ice, past the last nets of the fishermen, and into a world he did not know. There, standing at the edge of a frost-glass grove, was a woman cloaked in silver. She said only one thing: he dreams. And so he is called. From her hands a glove of woven frost, and far above a third falcon circled. The sky darkened. The next story began. To be continued.